Okay, let's talk about near-death experiences, NDEs. They're just endlessly fascinating, right? These incredibly dramatic, super personal stories from people who've been to the very brink of death and back. And for a lot of people, these stories are seen as the ultimate proof of an afterlife, a real glimpse behind the curtain. But, as we're going to see, the picture they paint is, well, it's a lot more complicated than you might think. So let's dive into this theological puzzle together.
And this is really the heart of the matter, isn't it? When somebody reports floating down a tunnel towards a beautiful, brilliant light, are they getting a perfectly clear, high-definition view of ultimate reality? Or is there something else going on? That's the big question we're going to dig into.
And you can totally see why. I mean, for some Christians, for example, when an NDE involves seeing a being of pure love or being reunited with family members who have passed on, that feels like a direct confirmation of everything their faith teaches. It's presented as slam dunk, first-hand evidence. But this is where things start to get tricky, because the moment you step back and look at a whole bunch of NDE reports from all over the world, a huge problem pops up. They don't all say the same thing. In fact, a lot of them flat out contradict each other. And right here, you can see the conflict in black and white. On the one hand, you have experiences that seem to fit so neatly into, say, a Christian worldview. But then you have these other accounts, reports of reincarnation, people seeing gods from totally different religions, and all sorts of experiences that are considered, unbiblical.
So here's the bottom line. If you want to use NDEs as proof for your specific worldview, you're backed into a corner. You have to start making choices. You have to decide which stories are the real ones and which ones you're just going to ignore or try to explain away. And that, my friends, is classic cherry picking.
So facing this contradiction, people usually fall back on two very common, but also very flawed ways of dealing with all these competing stories. Let's break down what they are.
So the first strategy is what you'd call selective use. Pretty simple. You just highlight and talk about the NDEs that support what you already believe. The second way is a bit more aggressive. It's active dismissal. You don't just ignore the accounts that don't fit, you actively reject them, usually by attacking their credibility. And that dismissal can get really extreme, leading to something called demonization. This isn't just saying, I don't believe that story. This is where you actively accuse the person of fabricating the experience, of just making it up to attack your beliefs. It's a full-on tactic to discredit any evidence that doesn't fit the narrative.
Okay, so if we can agree that cherry-picking and demonizing stories we don't like isn't exactly an honest way to get to the truth, what's the alternative? Is there any way, any framework that can make sense of all of these wildly different experiences? The ones that feel comforting, the ones that are confusing, and the ones that seem to contradict each other, without just throwing some of them in the trash?
Well, there is a proposed framework that actually tries to do exactly that, and it's all built around this really interesting concept of an in-between state. The core idea here is actually pretty simple, but it's also profound. A near-death experience isn't someone actually arriving at their final eternal home. Think of it more as a layover. It's a transitional temporary state, a stop along the way, not the end of the line.
So, in this view, the person is still spiritually tethered to their earthly life, to their body. They haven't gone through that final, complete transformation that some theologies, like Christianity, talk about, like the bodily resurrection. Whatever is happening before that ultimate change. So what this means is that while a person having an NDE might have this incredibly heightened perception, they're seeing and feeling things way beyond our normal five senses, it's not perfect. It's not a state of unfiltered, crystal clear truth. Their understanding is bigger, for sure, but it's still not complete.
And this idea leads us into a much bigger, much deeper philosophical concept about the gap between what we perceive and what's actually real.
This quote really nails it. There's always a gap between our perception of a thing and the thing in itself. Its true, objective reality. And even in a super heightened state like an NDE, that gap, that filter, it's still there.
So what this all suggests is that maybe, just maybe, all those contradictions we see in NDEs aren't actually contradictions in the afterlife itself. Instead, what if they're just reflections of our own human limitations, our earthly imperfections, and the flawed ways we try to understand a truth that's way beyond our full grasp?
And this is the really elegant part. This idea provides a way to make sense of everything. That report of reincarnation, it's not a theological problem anymore. It's simply an imperfect human perception of ultimate truth. Seeing a deity from another religion? Same thing. This way you can take all NDEs seriously as genuine human experiences without having to pick and choose.
And this leaves us with a fascinating, kind of mind-bending final thought. If even a profound, incredible, heightened experience like an NDE is still being filtered through our imperfect human lens, it makes you wonder about everything else, doesn't it? How much of what we perceive, in any state, is the world as it truly is versus the world as we are? It's a huge question that goes way beyond this one topic, right to the very core of how we know anything at all.